Hi everyone. There is nothing better than painting a little beach Polaroid in the middle of winter to chase those winter blues away. I am Catherine from the Pigeon Letters design team, and I have a great tutorial to show you how to paint a little beach Polaroid just like this. The supplies I use to create this little Polaroid painting include 300-pound watercolor paper. This is cut to 4 1/4 by 3 1/2 size, the size of a vintage Polaroid. I use 300-pound. It doesn't buckle quite as much when you're doing a little Polaroid painting. Washi tape, facial tissue like Kleenex. I have a ruler. I use Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, a pencil, my brushes, and then my palette of paints. And my colors include buff titanium, Naples yellow, cobalt teal, indigo, raw umber, and indanthrene blue. I just love painting on a vintage Polaroid size. This one measures 4 1/4 by 3 1/2. When I start to prep my paper, I go ahead and draw the square on the inside in pencil where my painting goes. If you're measuring 4.25 by 3 1/2, then the 3 sides of this are about 1/4 inch. So the top and the 2 sides measure 1/4 inch. The bottom then measures 1 inch. And that should give you a 3 inch by 3 inch square to paint. Once that is done, then I go ahead and add my washi tape so that I have clear, crisp lines around the edge of the Polaroid once I'm finished painting. All right, my washi tape is added, and I'm going to press down really well against the edge of where I'm going to paint. Next, I draw the horizon in, and I use the rule of thirds. So for this painting, you can see it in this one, I come down about 1/3 here for the horizon, and then it's close to 1/3 or a little more, a little less, depending on the painting, for where the sea and sand meet. So I'm going to draw my horizon in from the top of the paper. So I measure down about 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches. So for this one, I'm going to measure down about 1 inch. And then I lightly draw my line across for my horizon. So that's where my horizon will go. Once that's done, I do add a line of washi tape, just so that when I do my sky, it is a nice, crisp, clean line that goes across. So I'm going to add a little bit of washi tape here to that horizon. I'm going to press it down really well, again, like I did the outside. And then I'm going to start by painting my sky. For my sky, I'm going to do something a little different on this picture. I'm going to give my sky clouds, and it's a super simple process, and I thought I would share with you how I create a cloudy sky. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my indanthrene blue, which is going to be this blue right here. It's a nice medium to light blue. You could also use a cerulean blue. That's what I'm going to use. To begin, I start by wetting the sky area just a little bit, and I leave some areas that I don't wet. So there's some areas in here that I don't add water to, where I'm going to have the whiter clouds be. Then I'm going to take my blue paint and add it to the water areas. So I'm going to come in here and kind of leave some of those areas and just start adding the blue. It does not have to look like clouds right now. It just has to have some spaces where there is not blue all over the paper. Now at the top of the paper, I do like to have a little bit darker blue at the top of my sky than the bottom. Sometimes I will just take that, do something like this, lift off a little bit with a clean brush so it gets just a little bit lighter down towards the bottom. And those are some big clouds, so I might come in and fill in a little bit more. They don't look like much now, but the next step that I do is I take a piece of tissue or Kleenex like this and I wad it up. You don't want to keep it too flat. I wad it up so it gets lots of crinkles on there. And then I kind of flatten it down and I come in and I blot it right over top of my watercolor. So I do this like that and it starts to give it a cloudy sky. You can do this multiple times. There's been times where I do one round and it looks great. There's been other times where I come in and I add more on top of this. And then I keep blotting it until I get it to where I like the way it looks. So if I do that, once I have this edge completely saturated, I turn it and find a new edge. And then I keep doing this until I have a sky that I think looks pretty good with the clouds on it. I'm going to add just a little bit more. Try not to keep a hard edge anywhere. It's a little bit light still for me. I like my sky just a little bit darker so those clouds really kind of pop. So I'm going to come in and do a little bit more. Like I said, you can keep layering and taking away until you get it really the way you like it. Add a little bit more. Again, clean edge before I start that. Take just a little bit more off until I get it just where I feel like, oh, it looks like clouds. This is great background you can do on anything. That's how I did this one. And it's got the cloud look to it. I may add a little bit more towards the bottom. And just lighten it a little bit more towards the bottom. The more wadded up the Kleenex, the better it tends to look. So add that. Sometimes the less you do, the better. That gives me just a little bit of a cloudy sky or some big white fluffy clouds in my sky for my beach day. While my sky is drying, I'm going to paint the sand. And when I paint the sand, I'm going to use my buff titanium. I water it down pretty good. I don't want it to be too dark. And I come down here to the bottom and I start painting my sand. I like it darker towards the bottom down here of the paper, and then I fade it out towards the ocean. And I really want to only go up just a little bit more than a third of the way because I'm still using the rule of thirds. So I just fade it out and add a little clean brush water to it so it just fades out. There's no hard edge. I come back in and add a little bit more dark to the bottom. If that's not dark enough, I can add a little bit of Naples yellow to the bottom. So I can add just a little bit. Don't want it to get too yellow. If it does get too yellow, I also have that raw umber on here that I can add. I use that for a lot of shadows. And it's okay if the sand is not real smooth because to me it looks better when it's not real smooth and it has some shadows and dark areas in it. So come in and add just a little bit of that raw umber in there to give it some of those dark areas. So I add just, like I said, a little bit to the sand and fade it out towards where the ocean is going to be. So I have my sand, my sky, and I'm going to let it dry before I start the ocean. Now that my sky has dried, my sand is dried, I'm going to go ahead and remove the washi tape. So I'm going to pull it away. When I pull it, I'm going to pull it away from the sky. So I'm going to pull it down so it doesn't tear my paper. And I'm going to go slow and pull that off. And then I have a nice straight edge horizon line for my ocean. Now it's time to start painting the ocean. I'm going to use a cobalt teal. You can use all kinds of colors. The ocean, depending on where you are in the world, is different colors. So it could be more green, it could be more blue. Find colors that you like. I like to start with a medium shade so that I can still increase my darks and my lights to make my ocean look three-dimensional. I'm going to start, like I said, with my cobalt blue. I'm going to get a little bit of that. I like to start back here at the horizon with a line. So I start back here and draw a line. I do use bigger paintbrushes for all of this first part, and I use smaller paintbrushes when I get ready to do some of the details. Now that I have a line there, I then go back and I fade this out so it goes from dark down to light. So as it comes down, I get lighter and lighter, and I overlap my sand with my blue so that they overlap just a little bit, both of them in the light areas. Hopefully, if you've done that, you can already see it looks like the ocean. One of the key tips that I have for making an ocean or grass or any landscape is have it darker towards your horizon line. So I'm going to add just a little bit more coming down so that my blue comes down just a little bit farther, again, fading it out. So it's like that. Next, I like to add in a little bit more dark values towards my horizon. And I'm going to do this with the indigo blue just a little bit. That really will push my horizon back. And to do that, I'm going to get a flat brush so that I can just go right along the top and push that back. So one of the things I can do is do this and go along the top like that. It also gives you a little bit of waves in the water. So I'm going to go get my blue and just come across that top. And this is not real dark. I've watered down this indigo pretty good because I don't want it to overpower my blue. And then I come in and I add a few little lines in here. And you don't have to do this. You could have left the ocean the way it was if you like it like that. Add a few little lines like that. And then I'm going to switch my brush and kind of blend them out a little bit. So I'm going to come back to this one. And you don't want your brush real wet when you do this because I want my lines to look like they're waves in the water. So I just kind of come in, blend that out a little bit. And that pushes that just a little bit farther back on the horizon. Gives it a little waves, a little movement. You can bring down that indigo as far as you would like. I'm going to add just a little bit more of my cobalt in here. And I go along and just make some lines in here to make it feel just a little bit more like the water has a little bit of movement to it. And bring it down, just back down to my sand. And this line doesn't have to be straight. This is where we're going to put the sea foam in. So if you'd like to give it a little bit of an angle, you can kind of angle it like that. And that's where the sea foam is going to go. So you just kind of add layers to the ocean, just always remembering it's darker towards the horizon and lighter as you come down towards the sand. Now that my paint's dry, I'm going to go ahead and add the seafoam. So I'm going to go ahead and open my P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and I'm going to take a brush and put it on my paint palette. So I'm going to put it right there. If you haven't used this, it's sometimes really thick and it's very opaque. I like it for any time I needed to add white to a picture. It is also something that can be watered down, but when I'm making seafoam, I like to make it thick. For the seafoam, I'm going to take a line. I'm going to use my small brush. This is the round number 2, and I'm going to take a line right of the white right along the edge where my water and sand meet. So I'm going to take a line right along that edge. Again, I like to have mine a little bit heavier on that front edge, just like that. Then I'm going to add a little bit of lines behind this or above this, whichever way you want to call it. That's where there is a little bit more seafoam. And I try to keep these lines either diagonal or horizontal. That helps make it look more like it is in the correct perspective. You can add as much of these as you want or as little of these as you want. Alright, seafoam added. For the final step in the painting, I add a shadow underneath the seafoam. That brings a little bit of depth and attention to the seafoam. To do that, I try to use a darker color. So for this one, I'm going to use a little bit of that a little bit of that raw umber. So if I put that on there, I always kind of check to see how dark it is on a scrap paper. So I'm going to put that under there. Your white paint needs to be dry before this step or it'll all bleed together. So, and I have a little tiny brush, one of my favorite types of brushes, that I go through and add that detail in. So I just kind of follow it along the edge of that white paint. So that gives it that just a little bit of depth to that seafoam. I also sometimes add a little bit more to the seafoam back in here. So I add a little bit that gets a little dark. If it has it a little bit too dark, I come back on with a little bit of white and just blend it out, or a little bit of water. So I add a little bit to there. I don't like how dark it is, so I'm gonna come back in with my brush, nothing on it. Just kind of blend it a little bit out through there. And that gives it just a little bit of shadow to where the other seafoam places are behind the main line of the wave. And you can add as much of that or as little as you want. If you make a mistake and you add too much, just grab that Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White and go right back over it, and you can cover up some of it. So if I'm not happy with it, I can come back in with this, pick a little bit of that up, and just come in, and I just usually dot because I don't want it all gone, and I can lighten it if I got it too dark. From this point, if you wanted to add extra things in, you could add in mountains. So some of my pictures I have mountains in. Sometimes I add palm trees. Sometimes I add little seashells at the bottom. So experiment and play around, see what you come up with. All right, now for the fun part. I'm going to take off the washi tape. I always peel it away from my painting at a very extreme angle. So move this out of the way. And then the last part. And there you have it. One Polaroid painting of the ocean to chase away those winter blues. And there's a couple others that I have done previously. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you paint any seascapes using this tutorial, please tag me on Instagram. Let me see it. I would love to see and share it. Have a great day, and I will see you later.